Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Cooking the books, phony unemployment numbers right before the 2012 election is revealed. Why has the list of publicly traded companies on the New York Stock Exchange shrunk? And despite the weak U.S. economy, the world's money supply is still flowing in. Why?
Well, first of all, there's been a lot of consolidations, buyouts of one sort or another. But you know what the real reason is? And I've talked to a number of people who have privatized. And they say, we're sick and tired of all these regulations. If you are on the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ or any of the other smaller ones like American Stock Exchange was and so on, you have to come out every quarter with all kind of paperwork. I mean, you got to, and it's gotten worse. Everything that's happening got to be written up. So you spend half your time trying to justify coming out every quarter. That's only every 3 months. And this has made companies that were sick and tired of going through this and then being interrogated. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And they've gone private. It's still happening now.
And even threatened. I remember when Maxine Waters threatened to nationalize the oil companies. I mean, that's always in the back of those despots' minds.
Well,
taking over the big economy, taking over 1/6 of the economy, taking over the healthcare.
Well, the thing is, and you've got raiders now, and they're very good, like ICANN. ICANN is a multi-billionaire, but he has his own company for taking over other companies. So the Wilshire 5000 index, that's the most broadest index of all stock exchange companies. It's now down to 3,960. Using 1995 as a base, and that's really not even 20 years, the number of stock-listed companies is down 40% and still dropping.
Before we move on, I want to ask you, what do you think of the stock market right now? Every day it's breaking records. Mm-hmm. And is this a bubble that's got to burst?
No, it's not, and I'll tell you why. I follow that extremely closely with great focus because I write about this stuff. When you have to write something and it's going to get published, you really dig deep. I use a drilling term. It's tertiary drilling. Instead of surface drilling, it's down as deep as you can get. And I have to do that because I have to justify what I write about.
Is it the Fed pumping money? Is that what's helping prop this up?
That's the fact that what the Fed is doing. You see, the Fed has taken upon itself, and I'm not going to justify it or I'm not going to negate it. The Fed feels that it was their responsibility to try to do something about unemployment. No other Federal Reserve Board chairman has ever done that.
Which they didn't have an effect on that.
Well, no, they haven't had that. It's true. But the whole idea was, well, if we buy, our basic value system, national value system is based on the U.S. Treasury. And the U.S. Treasury has sometimes as many as 5 auctions a week. So they put those on there, and with the Fed is spending $85 billion a month. If you multiply that times 12, you get $1 trillion.
And this is the third time around of them doing this.
That's right. Absolutely. And but the interesting thing
So why is the stock market not a bubble in your opinion?
Well, because it's so spread out, and the people that have invested, believe it or not, since 2000, on 2009, on March 9th, 2009, the market using the Dow Jones Industrial Index was 6,000. It's now at 16,000. So you say, oh my God, it's like 145%. The reason for that is there is so much liquidity, not only here in the United States, but the rest of the world. What do I mean by that? Money is not, you had the big inflation in the late 70s and 80s, 90s. Now you got so much money, you have no inflation. You have a surplus of employees, not only here in the United States, in all parts of the world. You've got a surplus of commodities, and you've got a surplus of capital in order to invest in companies. There are less companies to invest in, that's part of it. And secondly, companies' values had sunk so low that it has taken until now to catch up. Now, when I say sunk so low, there's a ratio. If your price earnings ratio is 15% or less, just using that as a broad spectrum, it means you're undervalued. If it gets up to 20 or 30 or 40%, you're getting into a high risk. And this is a general statement. We are our lagging indicator right now would indicate we are somewhere around 15, which is acceptable. You know, it's not exactly a major opportunity, but at the same time, it's not a runaway. What we had we had two big bubbles. We had the housing bubble, which had to do with a lot of phony houses because Carter. Well, the mortgage.
Are you going back even farther?
Well, I'm going back to the Carter years where they said you've got to give everybody a loan, even if they can't pay it back. That was part of the housing.
Fair Housing Act.
Yeah, the Fair Housing Act, exactly. You know, you can't discriminate. That makes you.
Not only can you not discriminate, you have to give these loans to people.
Exactly.
They can't pay them back.
And then, of course, the worst part of that, the final step of that, were these mortgage-backed derivatives, which they cut into little pieces. By the way, that's one of the reasons why the Canadian banks are so very promising for the future, and they're making money hand over fist because they never got involved in these. But one of the things that the Federal Reserve Board is doing, they're buying back every month about $15 billion of derivatives. And by doing that and taking it off the balance sheet of the banks who are holding it with no value, are putting a value by the fact that they're buying these derivatives from the banks. So this is why so many banks are flourishing. You know, can you imagine three of the biggest banks in the country are Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and J.P. Morgan Chase. Well, J.P. Morgan Chase made a deal with the government that they will pay him $13 billion for this security guy in London who made a phony deal or whatever it was. But even after that, they're opening themselves up for private suits by people whose money was debased because Chase didn't do their job. Well, the very fact they have that much money in the first place is unbelievable. You know, they're still considered a sound bank with a great future, even after making this deal. So the thing is, there is so much money around. And you also asked the question about why is the rest of the world targeting the United States?
Why is so much money flowing into the U.S.?
Yes, we're number one in the world right now. And China is one of the ones in.
Because it stinks here, but it stinks everywhere else worse?
No, that's not it. China looks to be the number one economy of the world by the year 2050. They see there are some real bargains here in the United States.
And they're buying up real estate and companies.
Real estate. They bought Smithfield Ham. You know, they're moving in.
They bought the largest movie chain in America.
They're doing it quietly, and they're making a big deal out of it. And they have $4 trillion of surplus on their books right now. So they're using that money to buy tangible things. See, the Japanese in the 80s, when everybody thought they were trying to take over the world, they were buying high and selling low. They bankrupted themselves literally by spending too much money for the wrong things. The Chinese are smarter. What they're doing is they're doing what's good for their long-term economy.
Well, and you mentioned long-term. That's where I was going to go with this. Isn't the fact that the Chinese look in terms of past the next quarter to the next century?
Their civilization goes back 6,000 years. They are the smartest business people maybe in the world, but certainly in Asia. You know, when you go to Southeast Asia and you go to places like Cambodia and you go to Singapore, which is 75% Chinese, you go to Vietnam, well, who do you think does all the business? It's not the indigenous population. It's the Chinese who are the businessmen. Some people use a term which is not a pleasant term. They call them the Jews of the Far East. I mean, you know, they're trying to say that in a complimentary way. It doesn't come out that way. But the point is, you know, Jews generally are very business oriented. Well, so are the Chinese. Both, what both have in common? They are long-lasting civilizations. and they know business. They're not superficial. They're not like these crazy people running around the Middle East today who have no civilization of anything other than a belief system that is built on lies and chicanery.
Now, there's only a couple minutes left in this segment, but I want to go back and I want to applaud us. Now, we weren't the only ones, but there were very few people that pointed out, number one, that the employment was going to go down below 8% prior to the election, and number two, that it actually did. And now we know that the reason that the White House took over the census when the Obamas took over in 09,
let me correct you if I may. You're right. We did say that, but we said they're going to make it go down.
Of course.
No, but the way you said it, it didn't go down.
No. They were cooking the books, now we know this.
Yes.
And that's the reason. We couldn't figure out why they would take over the census.
Wait, give us the opportunity to crow a little bit. We predicted that it was not going to actually be under that 7%, and that only measures under 8%.
The magic number.
They'll make it.
8% is the magic number of any re-elected.
In my writing, I mentioned the real key is the number of people that want to work and are capable of working and are working. And that number it got lower and lower and lower. And I couldn't figure out how can you have 7.3 or 4 or 5% when there's more and more people out of work who want to work.
Right, people who just stopped looking for work.
We are now.
And we only created around 40,000 jobs, and it dropped 0.3% magically to get it under that 8%. And now we know that the Census Bureau had a lot to do with that. What do you think about that?
Well, what I think about it is they read the American people very well. American people are so distracted by celebrities, by entertainment, by all the latest deals going on. They go to the movies. They go to all the hot stuff that goes.
The Miley Cyruses of the world.
Exactly. That's what people are thinking today. Plus, we have been so enmeshed today in
technology.
Technology, but specifically communications technology. We are now in a position where, I'm not saying this for self-aggrandizement, but I don't know if anybody personally who writes as much as I do and loves doing it. I had a person on a plane when I was going out to a convention.
Well, finish that statement. You're going to say without a computer. Isn't that what you were going to say?
Well, I don't. Yes, but I happen to have a very good memory. 95% of the stuff that I write comes out of the back of my head. But I don't want to make a big deal out of that. I'm only saying is taking that knowledge and writing creatively and informatively. I had a guy on a plane. He saw me. I had a pad in front of me, and I was writing with a pen. He says, you're the first person I've seen in a year that actually uses his brain and puts it in his hand so he can write it. He said, really great writers can't just email or Twitter or tweet they must think and come out with something that they can put down. And it's very hard to do if you try to do it with single sentences.
And with one finger.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.